Brilliant. Thank you, Silke. Thank you, Isabel. That was absolutely fascinating. I've got so many questions here, and obviously so was everybody listening. But I'm going to take chair's privilege and kick off if that's okay. Um, it feels to me so you've got um, patient public involvement, both in terms of the operational stuff, i.e., the research, but also in the governance of your organization, what I think you referred to as that political participation, like via the two boards that you have. And I just want to sort of, if you could just touch on um, some of the challenges, and in particular, you had a slide of the challenges, but also you mentioned about the need, I think you called it for cultural change. And I just wanted to ask broadly, how easy or difficult has it been within Germany, within your organization, to introduce patient and public involvement? And by that, I guess what I'm really talking about is any resistance from researchers and indeed what we might call professionals.
Yeah, I can maybe start. There's a lot of small challenges to overcome when working in governance with people with lived experience. Just for example, the meeting times. If you have meeting times for that suit researchers and any governance structure, that's the times other people still are at work, and that is a major challenge for people with lived experience. But also much more are the very fast, very channeled processes of how these governance structures work. They usually don't allow much for extra questions, for extra time, for explanation. It's a research system is a very complex system with a lot of forms, and I think, it takes a lot of patience to take people with lived experience along with these processes, because of course we cannot have all the insights into how this works as quickly as somebody that already spent 20, 30 years specialized in these processes. I think we were very lucky because the ministry in the call for the German Center for Mental Health application inserted that it needs to have contributing PPI structures. So we had a strong backup from the ministry, which we used to say, no, we are asked to do this. That was a major help. And then I think also in governance structure, pretty soon it was realized that this is an addition, or this is an asset to the whole endeavor. But saying it's still a process, getting used to each other, and I think this will continue. But as long as there's people convinced, as for example, Isabel doing participatory research since 2007, she started off very early and was very convincing also. And I think her talking more to the researcher side, me talking to the patient side, why this is a chance to get involved. I think that was a good idea to work in teams as sort of gapping or bridging the groups together. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Isabel, you mentioned about you wanted to establish a standard for patient and public involvement. Um, so when you were setting up your structures, how you go about your patient and public involvement, were you working to like a set of principles, some guidance, or is it one of those things that you have just addressed challenges as you've gone along?
Well, I mean, we have set out standards, or a guideline as to what we think is ethically indicated, and what we consider participation, as I've showed you before on the one slide, and that we have transported and communicated pretty consistently to our principal investigators and to all people involved. Yes, I mean, that being said, it is still, and that in part also answers your first questions, I guess. It is still something that the PIs, the researchers kind of implicitly think they know, but explicitly when you ask them and when you ask them how they realize PPI in their project and so forth, you see that there's a large gap of knowledge actually. And there's also answering your first question, I feel there's a large willingness to open towards this new culture and to integrate it. I really have to say, I would say a good 80% of researchers embrace this idea. 20% do not. They feel definitely it's prescribed. I mean, that's a gut feeling, right? These numbers, but that's what I feel. And but when it comes to implementing things, the effort really taken to implement them and the knowledge about these guidelines that you mention are really small, and I don't see a large willingness or effort to really dive into this. It runs along, and people actually often think we will fix it, we in the infrastructure already, although you saw that we have just one full-time person per site. And we have about 150 researchers per site. How can one full-time person that often has an experts by experience background, can serve the PPI elements of all these projects going on of all these researchers? So we do need the researchers, early career scientists and PIs actually to also embark on that journey, to actively help recruit experts by experience, to realize these PPI elements in the project. And there we see much less willingness to dive into this, to cope with the extra time it takes, to really digest and ingest the guidelines, what participation actually means, how you even name an expert by experience, that comes on board. So it starts already with being willing to change their language a bit and stuff, where I see already a certain hesitation to really dive into this. And that's, it's promising on one hand, the broad willingness, but then also sometimes quite disappointing when I look at the actual willingness to change their things and to invest time in this process.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isabel. And that's a nice segue, I think, to questions been raised by Sarah and Haley. So when you are supporting and or coordinating your patient and public involvement activities, do you work with patient and public involvement professionals? And do you involve people with lived experience to coordinate all those activities?
Silke, you want to get started?
Yeah, happy to. I think what we were not able to say on the slides, but I'm happy to answer or add that is, for example, the PPI infrastructure itself is a participatory infrastructure. We have professionals like trained in PPI. These are usually the PPI representatives. That's the one position per site. But we have an equal number of people with lived experience from the triological board. So we have one of each site also in the board. So that is something I think is pretty new and outstanding, that the infrastructure itself develops everything in a participatory way. We give everything back to the Triological Council to get approval. So we're trying to just provide some knowledge, some training, and everything we do, we call it a draft. So every time we do something, it's a draft. It can be changed. It can be, given back, do this, or we have different ideas. So our PPI is informed by what's already out there, but highly flexible to, at the same time, being changed over and over, because it's continuous participation inside the structure.
Fantastic. Thank you. And so I've got some questions from Gareth and from Imelda about your training. I've got three questions here. First, is your training accredited? Do people receive certificate for their training, which perhaps they could show potential employers, etc.? And do you have like ongoing training, so like a kind of continual professional development?
Yeah, this is maybe a quick answer. Currently, we don't have in-house training. We're working on such in-house training for researchers and people with lived experience. Currently, we have to, help them find training resources in Germany, which out there training resources, and some of them do hand out certificates. Some of them are really long time trainings. Others are maybe a week. some are longer than a year, and they have different backgrounds. But overall, we try to include it in our center, because then we can have continuously, and possibly people, they don't always start at the same time. You jump in, you're a new member of the board, you can do a modular training or something like that. So that would be really great, and we're actually aiming for this, but it's not there yet. So.
Yeah. Although we should say, Silke, that we have certain workshop formats that we already give. I mean, it's not a 5-day course or so, but it's a 2-3 hour course that we do, on our annual conferences, for instance. And we have Meet the Experts symposia where things are taught to experts by experience. So we have tiny bits of education we have already.
Yeah, trying to address the needs. If there's somebody, what is this? Can somebody address this? Then we actually go ahead and do such a presentation or little workshop. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And I've got a couple of questions, one from Michael and one from Natasha about the boards. So one question is, what does political participation look like? And particularly in terms of the composition, the representativeness on the board. And do you have routes set up for shared learnings, insights across the different boards?
Would you like?
Yeah, I mean the shared learning, we don't have procedures for that. I mean, Silke.
No, it was on my challenges list. We create more spaces for exchange and learning. Well, that's a time pressure issue. You are always under time pressure. Continue, and I find this is quite a bummer that we often miss out on learning opportunities. So it's a goal to find better formats which can be done, even though there's time pressure.
And to give you an example of typical political topics that are talked about there, it's, for instance, how should experts by experience be paid? Should they be paid, and how high should the payment be? So this is something that is discussed, and then a consensus is formed. And then, this decision is given to the executive board and to the PIs. Please do this, realize this. And we as PPI infrastructure help it then in the realization. But we are, as the infrastructure, we are not the one forming the political decisions. That the triological board does that. Or, for instance, should there be a broad consent? This is something that researchers always want. Relatives are and patients are highly skeptical about this, so they demand certain information to be given, education to be given about this, and then make, form an opinion about this, and then ask the center to realize it, for instance. I mean, topics that come up that might be problematic. That need a kind of decision where a direction of the views of patients and relatives is important to be given to the executive board. These are typical topics that are discussed there. Yeah.
And I think we also didn't mention that there's many other infrastructures in the German Center. There are more research-focused infrastructures, but each of these infrastructures has people with lived experience participating. So we help out a lot understanding what's going on there, but also they bring topics back into the triological board, discuss it, take it back. We are involved. It's a level of transparency that I haven't seen yet in any structure like that. We're involved in the proposal writing for the next 2 years. It's everything completely transparent and always with a voting right. And it does make a difference if there's 20% with the people with lived experience, 20% with early career scientists. That means there is actually decision-making power. At least our arguments do have some weight in very much every part of these structures.
Fantastic, thank you. I've got a more specific question here from Sarifa. Could you say something about how you involve people with learning disabilities and people with autism?
We actually have a strong participation of people with autism. Very highly interested a lot of times in research, but also in the background we're from with the participatory autism research. Learning disabilities is very difficult at the moment. We have to say it's another thing I would like to address more. But I think that's a much bigger structural issue with, again, time pressure and frames that we're setting up currently structures which do not address these needs, but once they're there, I think we have more space to extend it. So first we need a document or an explanation flyer in general, and then we can translate this and help making these materials more accessible. Saying this again, in Germany, we don't have any examples. We don't have any other institution we could kind of mirror. We need to, from scratch, kind of work out on every material, on every inclusion format, and doing this again, always participatory, not coming top down, is quite a long process. But it is something that is clearly on the mind of, for example, the triological board. It's something that's really been put forward also, that we should include more children, that we should include, have more diversity. And so they continuously remind us of these tasks, that we don't just forget about them. Yeah.
Fantastic. I've got a question here from Gareth. Do you have many people with lived experience who are co-applicants or co-authors of research proposals and publications?
Yes, we do. We actually, for our intramural funding, so for a certain amount of the money, for which the members of the German Center can apply for internally for research projects, it is actually mandatory that PPI be involved in the projects. And this is taken very seriously, because people are given, or the researchers are given points by the quality of PPI that's integrated into the projects. So we don't have a single new project since 2 years that's being started that does not involve PPI to a large extent. So mostly these projects involve a small group of experts by experience, let's say 4 or 6 people, patients and relatives, that accompany the whole course of the project, that have maybe meetings 2-3 times a year, where the project is advised and shared decisions are taken. And then also towards the end, experts by experience are taken on the publications. I mean, obviously, given that we have only existed for 2 years, not so many publications have come out of the very research, but there have already been publications on, for instance, the setup, the infrastructures, and the general mission of the German centers, where we have publications where experts by experience are involved. I can only talk about two publications that I've been involved with. They had half of them were experts by experience in the author list.
If I may add on to this, it's the publication regulation that was set up for the German Center for Mental Health is the very first in an infrastructure that has clear guidelines on how people with lived experience in a project also have right to authorship, in which conditions and how that applies. And another thing I find very fascinating, even for the intramural funding, people from the triological board may apply as head of an application. You have to partner up, of course, with somebody who is legally able to, get the fund through an institution, because we cannot get it as individual people. But you can show up, or you can turn something in as an applicant, and that is, I think, also very special.
Fantastic.
And we
Thank
do
you.
have projects that have, or one project so far that has a person with lived experience from the triological board being the head applicant.
Sure. Question here from Biba. What are the age ranges of your child/adolescent boards?
Given that Silke and I are not doing them, it's a bit difficult, but I have been on a panel with one of these board members, and I think there were people from, or children from the age of 10 or 9, 8, like maybe even up to adolescents and young adults. So I've been recently been on a board of adolescents and young adults. They were until 21, 22. So not very young children, I guess, so far. But yeah, I guess 8 or so. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Question from Michael is about evaluating the impact of patient and public involvement. Could you say something about how you went about that?
Yeah, we haven't gone about that yet. The first 2 years were set up phase where we try to establish or think about these structures. Now we're going to evaluate, and we're about to translate right now the peers and the PEAT evaluation questionnaires, which have been evaluated really well, and we would like to pilot them in the German Center now and see whether that works for us really well, or we need to make changes, adapt it, or even create a new one. But we would like to, of course, use tools which are well established in the beginning and then adapt.
Yeah. And obviously also as part of this, as part of our open questions, to see how really the culture has changed a bit, how researchers as well as experts by experience changed through the process. And I have to say that a lot of researchers are waiting for this. It took us quite some time to establish the basis, because again, we are just one person per site, which is not a lot for all, that has to be undertaken, the large plan. But a lot of researchers are waiting for that, because for them, it doesn't seem to be enough that it's legally and ethically indicated. They want to see the facts, how does our research benefit from that? So yeah, that's why it's also important to us to set this up.
And thank you very much. I'll take one final question from Elizabeth. So how to ensure that patients are meaningfully involved and supported throughout all stages of the PSP process? So from the initial survey to the uncertainty of analysis, prioritization, and the follow-up phase after the top 10 priority areas have been published.
You mean the user-led project or all the other projects too?
I'm assuming, I'll speak on Elizabeth's behalf here, she means all of them. Yeah, how do you do it across that process?
I mean, in general, in our documentation form that we say that each project has to fill out before they get started, we actually ask who's responsible, which researcher in your team is the main person responsible for realizing PPI and being the person to talk to, the consistent person, that is the one responsible for the PPI elements. So we are really, and we ask specifically what kind of training are your experts by experience getting? What are the different stages where you want to involve them, and what risks do you envision? So that's something we ask them to fill out before, then to get a consultation with us on these points, because that gives us the opportunity to look already who's given in, what kind of tasks should people be involved. We also encourage actually this to be put in these elements in ethic proposals. This is also something that is not done typically in Germany. If you involve experts by experience, it is thought, they are not subjects of the study, so we don't need to indicate that in an ethical proposal. But we say, hey, this is a vulnerable group. They are part of this research endeavor in general. We think this should be part of an ethics proposal also. So also this is a step of quality control, or making sure that the people involved are safe and being treated friendly.
Lovely, thank you. And thank you very much for that. I'll bring an end to it there. And just to reflect that there's been many comments there about how proud you should be of your work and what a fantastic presentation it was. So I think we've all learned something from that. So thank you very much. If Heidi, if we can have the final slide, thank you. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. You can contact us. You can join the International Patient and Public Involvement Network. We have a website. There's a website address, so please do join us if you haven't already. You can also follow us on Blue Sky and connect with us on LinkedIn. This recording will be available on our website and will be sent to everybody as well that attended or registered for this event. So thank you for that. So that just leaves me. This is our last webinar, by the way, of 2025. And it just leaves me really to say thank you to Isabel and Silke for an absolutely fascinating presentation. And it's good to see that patient public involvement is clearly growing traction, or gaining traction, I should say, in Germany, which is really great to hear. Thank everybody for participating with your great questions and for coming along today. I really do hope you enjoyed it. And I'm sorry we couldn't ask all the questions, but there's so many that have come through, which is very nice. And also thank you, of course, to Heidi for stepping in and helping with the organization of this webinar. I've got one final slide just to alert you to in 2026, we're going to have another presentation, this time from Ireland, from Claire Reardon and Adele Murphy. And again, it's very much about patient and public involvement in research in Ireland, and then talking about how perhaps they're embedding it in their organization. But we will so look out for that date, but that will be our first one of 2026. So thank you again to Silke and Isabel, and everybody have a lovely rest of your day. And also, of course, have a very Merry Christmas if indeed you are celebrating Christmas. And if not, season's greetings and happy holidays. Bye now, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.